Hello guys, welcome back to a new video. In this video we are going to design a to-do app with the help of only PHP. So let's see how we have to do it. I have already created the UI part and this designing of this UI we have covered in previous videos. Now in this video what we are going to do is basically persist the entire data of the to-do app inside a MySQL database, and we have a table which is going to display all the to-dos, and there are few buttons on top which which are for various purposes. Like for example, the first button is to create a new to-do. Then you can select you can see a column with radio buttons. So if you want to edit or delete or any of these actions you want to do, like mark complete or mark pending, you just have to click on that particular button and click on the action that you want to perform. So this is what we are going to program in this particular video. So let us begin. So I have the code open over here. So these are the three files that are there. So index.html, the edit todo.html, and add todo.html. So these are the few pages that I have already created. I would like to show you the add to do. So basically it is very simple. There's only one field, and by default the actions will be pending or be marked pending, right? So I can go back, and this is the entire thing that we have ready. Okay, so now let's see how we can make this thing working. Okay, so I will share the source of this starter template in the description. So let's begin. So the first thing that I would like to do is open our server. So I'm using Laragon over here. You can use any server you want, like XAMPP or WAMP, whatever is your preferred way of doing it. If you use Docker, then you can use Docker also. It's not that important. But first thing that I would like to do is create a database. So I will click over here and open my database browser, and then I will right click and create a new database. So let's call it to do PHP. Okay, so let's call this database to do PHP. So I have the database. Now I will create few tables, or in fact we need only one table. Let's call it to dos, and I will start adding columns. So the first column, let it be ID. Okay, now we are not dealing with users right now. So there is going to be only one user, so it's not important for us. So once we do that, I can add a little bit, yeah, then I can add another column. Let's call it to do title, and that can be you can select text, but I don't want it to have too much size, so I'm just selecting a varchar of 250, and then I can have status. I would like to be, it can be varchar, but let me see, what should I select? Yeah, I can select tiny int. So let's select tiny int. Okay, and it's going to be unsigned, and I think that's it. We need only 3 entries: ID, title, and the status. Okay, so status will be either true or false. So if it is 0, it means it's going to be pending. So let's put a default. So let's make the default as 0. By 0 I mean it is what do you say, status is pending, right? And I think other things are fine, and I will click on save. So that creates our table. right? And let me see, and I want the ID to be unique, or I can say it can be the primary key, and I think that is it. I also want my ID to be auto increment, so I will put it over here. This is going to be my auto increment value, so let's come over here, and yeah, here it is. So I've selected auto increment on this particular ID column, so this is going to auto increment. Let's save it, and that's it. So our table is done. Now we can insert some entries. So right now there is no entry, so let's insert a row, and let's start by 1. Let's add another entry. Let's make it complete. So I will add 4 entries, out of which one of them is complete. Okay, so this is what my table looks like. Okay, so our first part is done, setting up the database is done. Now let's come back to our page, right? So let's set up first of all. What I would like to do is, first of all, I will like to rename this file to index.php, so that I can start using PHP over here. Then the second thing I would like to do is, first I would like to create a new file which is going to be having my config variables, right? So I will add, so let's define some constants. So the first constant I would like to set is db, let's say, host. Okay, and I will say 127.0.0.1, so that is going to be my db host. Then I'm going to define db name, that is the database name. Let me duplicate this few more times. Then I will say this is db user, which is going to be root. And this is password, this will be password, which is blank in our case. And db name is the database name that we have selected, is to do php. Okay, so that is what we have selected, right? Okay, so once this is done, now our configs are clear. Now let's come over here, and now just to check, let me just echo out any one of the variables. Okay, and let's save it. Let's run config, and oh, did I forgot to add quotes? Okay, so now let me run it again. Yeah, so now you can see I have created a constant called db host, db user, db password and db name. Okay, so that's done. Now next step is, now this these the our all our configuration related things are going to be in this file. And now we need to have another file which is going to be handling the database connection and the session. So let's do that. So database dot php. Okay, so here I would add, first let us start the session. So if empty dollar underscore session. Okay, so if the session is empty, then I would do session start. Okay, so session start, right? So whenever there is no session, I would start a new session. Okay, so that is what this particular statement does. Okay, next, now I want to make a database connection, right? So let's select a variable called db, which is going to be MySQL underscore connect. Okay, now this connect will take 4 parameters. That is going to be our db host, then db user, then db password, and finally I will be needing db name. Okay, so these are the 4 things that MySQL connect needs. Okay, now once this is done, that means the connection is done. I should check whether the connection is actually done. If db is equal to false, that means the connection creation failed. I can just say die cannot connect to database, right? So I can do this. So now that's it. So we have connected our we have made our connection to the database now, and we have also created our config file. So now whenever we want to use the database, we only thing we have to do is we have to include both those files. Let me show you. So we have to include once. So we are going to include 2 files. First is the config.php, and then we are going to include database.php, right? So these 2 files we are going to include, and once this is included, now the database connection is there with us, right? Now the first thing that we have to do is so let's come down. So you can see this is the table which generates the what do you say, results, right? So this is the table which is showing the to dos, right? So we will come to the buttons a little later, but first let us see how to display the 4 to dos that we have already added over here. Okay, so let's take care of that. So the first thing I should do is you can see I have the same TRs repeating again and again, right? So this gives us a hint that only one TR has to be there, and this we will put it inside a for loop or for each loop and repeat this based on how many times the to-dos are there in our table, right, in our database. So here we have to run the for each loop, right? So now we can do one thing. We already have a database, so we can do one thing is we can create we can run the query here. So let's try to let's come over here. So wherever your code is going to repeat, just before that we will open a PHP tag. Okay, and now here I will start doing my basic queries and all those things. So let's start by the SQL statement. So the basic SQL statement would be to select star from, I think it was to dos. That's it, right? So this is a basic query that I want to run. Now I want to get the result, right? So result is going to be MySQL query. Okay, so I'm going to run this query. Now the query requires two things. The first one is the link, and the link is basically our DB variable from the database. Okay, so you can see this variable is what is the first thing that is required. Next, it needs the SQL statement, right? So SQL statement we have just created inside this variable. So these are two things that are required, right? Now once this query is executed, now we can check uh, for the validity of the query. So that will be an extra step, but I am just directly going to go ahead and do a while loop and store the data inside a variable called data, and I will simply do MySQL I fetch all. Sorry, I will not use all. I will use MySQL fetch sock, and this expects result as its input. Okay, so once this is done, now this while loop is going to run. Okay, and whatever is inside the curly braces. So now we have to mention where the curly braces should end. Okay, so that much part is going to repeat, right? So I will come down, open a new PHP tag over here and end the curly brace over here, so that now what happens is this entire tr is going to repeat continuously. Okay, so let's see it in action. So I will remove all these extra trs from here. Now just before removing it, just to show you, whenever a particular task is complete, I am adding a class complete in the tr. Okay, so this has to be noted. So let's delete this and save it, and let's see what do we get. So if I refresh, you can see I'm getting 4 rows and all of them are same. That simply means that that particular loop ran 4 times, right? Now our only job is to change whatever is there over here. Okay, so this, let's start by changing this. I will do echo. So our data is inside that variable called data. So I will take that data, and inside the data, if you remember our database field name, so in our database we had a column called title, right? So we will mention that over here. So now what I'm doing is I'm just getting one row. So what this MySQL fetch assoc is, that is basically means associative array. So what this basically does is it takes one row at a time and puts it inside the data variable, right? So if you look at into this, you will see that data id will be basically 1, then data title will be wake up, and data status will be 0, right? That will be first row. When the second time it runs, it will give you the second row, and like that it keeps on running till the end. Okay, so that is what is happening. Let's save this, go back and do a refresh. You can see now everything is all the titles are coming up properly, right? Next, let's see now the status of pending or not. Okay, so complete or pending, that has to be changed. So again I will use this statement, paste it over here. Okay, and instead of directly now first of all I will check the status, and this status I'm going to check if it is true or false. Okay, so by default if it is 1 it will result in true, and if it is 0 it will result in false, right? So I'm just using a ternary operator over here. So ternary operator is like if else, but in a single line, right? So if this particular statement, that is data of status, if it is true, then what should happen? So I should echo if it is true I should echo complete, right? So that's it. So let's try it out. If I refresh, you can see eat breakfast is complete, whereas others are pending, right? Next, I want to mark now if you remember we had the class in that particular tr as complete if that particular task is complete, right? So we can use the same thing from here and paste it over here, and let's say class is equal to, I will add a quotes over here and end the quotes over here. Okay, so basically what I'm trying to do is inside this value is going to print something, right? So if the status is complete, I should say it is the class that should be added is complete, otherwise there will be no classes. Okay, so just look at this statement. So what I have done is, if I just remove this line, you would be able to better understand. So basically what I'm trying to do is now here if I do not put any class, let me save it and refresh. Now this becomes a normal tr, right? But if I put the class complete in them, so you can see what happens. So this is what happens. So everything is marked complete, right? So now I don't want to apply this to every item. I want to conditionally check if the status is true, then only the class complete should be added. So that is what I've done over here. So I'm checking the status, and if the status is true, I'm adding the class complete, otherwise there will be no class added. Okay, so let's save it and now refresh, and you can see only eat breakfast has the class. Okay, so now our displaying of the to do part is done. Now let us see how to add a new to do, right? So for adding a new to do, let's click on add new to do. So we will deal with this part in a while. Okay, so till then we can do this with the help of a function. Okay, so let's handle that in a while, but let's go to add new to do. So for that, first of all I can click on add new to do. It goes to this page add to do .html, right? So let's open that add to do .html. This is basically nothing but a simple form with with only one thing, that is one input element, that is going to be the to do title. Okay, so I can say this as title. Okay, so let's call the name as title, and this form is right now posting to nowhere, right? So it is right now the action is empty and the method is also empty, right? So I want to put the method as post. Okay, so let's select the post, and it should go to somewhere. Let's select where do you want to go. So I want to send it to, let's say, process.php. so we have not yet created this file, but let's say it goes to this particular file. Okay, so let's create that file. So process.php, right? So this is the file where it goes. Now what happens is, when I open this page and if I type something and click on submit button, the save button, it sends the data to process.php. Okay, so no problems there. Now what I want to do in process.php, let me save this, and let's come over here. And here what I'm going to do is I'm just going to print r $_post. Okay, so let's see what exactly happens, what exactly is posted from this form. Okay, so let's come over here, click a refresh, add something over here and click save. It goes to this particular page, process.php. Perfect. And it says title. It gets an array of title equal to whatever we have entered. Perfect. So now what we have to do is, now we have to come over here and handle the what do you say, insert this into the database. Okay, now whenever we want to do any operations in the database, we have already created two files: config, where all our data is stored, username and password, etc., and the database is where everything, all the connections are made, right? So whenever we want to do anything related to database, we have to add the two lines, that is these two include statements on top of it, so that you can connect to the database. Now once I have connected to the database, next what I can do is I can first do a simple validation. I can do a simple validation the title if the title is empty. Okay, so I would say that no, I cannot enter anything into the database, right? So that type of validation is required, um, because if you look at the form, we already have a required field over here, but that will be, that can be overridden by anyone. So it's better always to have a validation in your uh, PHP file also. So I have done that. Now only thing I have to do is I have to redirect. Okay, so header, I can say location, it will go to add to do .html. Okay, so it will go back to that page. That's it. Okay, so it will go back to the page from where it came, right? So let's we don't have to test it, I think, because let's test it. So I will remove this required field for the time being. Let's go back, refresh, and if I try to save it, you can see it comes back. Okay, if I submit, it is very fast, we cannot see it, but it is going and coming back. Okay, so that's perfect. So I will put the required back, and now this part is working. Now let's make a simple query. So let's do SQL, and let's say insert into the name of the table is to dos, and I have to give the values. So ID is automatic, right? And the status is also automatic. So only thing I have to provide is the title. Okay, so title is, now here I have to give the title. So I will give it in over here. Okay, so I will give it in this, or better I will just use double quotes and put it over here. So $post, and here I would say title. Okay, perfect. Now let's see, is it giving me some error? No. Okay, so let's run echo $SQL. Okay, and let's see what is the SQL query that we get. Okay, so let's refresh, let's submit, and you can see this is the query that I'm getting: insert into to-dos title values. Okay, perfect. and now there is a problem right now, but let's go back and let's change to something else. Let's try again. Okay, fine. So it is working perfectly. Now only thing we have to do is just run the query. Okay, result is equal to MySQL I query, and the query requires two things: the DB, that is the link, and the SQL that we have to run, right? And that's it. So our query is done. Now we will have to check if the result, if it is not equal to false. Okay, so if the result is not equal to false, then that means our database sorry, our entry is done. So I can say echo entry done. Okay, so let's suppose this is our case, right? So let's refresh and continue. So it says entry is done. Let's go back and check. Yes, the entry is done, right? So now I can start adding our to dos, right? But now here you can see obviously this is not what we want, right? So we want it to go back to the index.php, right? So I can do, instead of echoing entry done, I would simply say, I will copy this from here and I will say go to index.php, right? So that will add the entry into the database and then go to the end, go to the index page, right? So let's say hello, click save, it goes over here. Perfect. Okay, now the next thing that I would like to see is, now I'm getting the data perfectly. Now what I also would like to see is, to get a status message that yes, it is entered into the database, right? So what I can do is, I can pass a query parameter over here, like something like this, like say error. Okay, so I can say index.php error is equal to, and I can say new to do added. Okay, so I can do something like this. Now obviously this will be URL encoded, so that is not an issue. So now it will come over here and it will go to the index.php page with this URL, right? This is one option of one way of doing it. So let me show you how this can be done. So I can save this, come to index.php, and let's go below the buttons and let's add a paragraph. And here I can say status new to do added. Okay, so let me see how this looks. Okay, so this is how it looks. So let me use, I just want to have a little bit of padding on top, sorry, margin on top. Yeah, so this is fine. So this is the status that I get. Now I'm not worried too much about the styling and everything, so I can see the status. So styling can be done on a later stage. So now I just want to show this conditionally, so I don't want to show this whenever when there is no status. Okay, so what we can do is we can add a PHP tag over here, and we can do an if not empty. Okay, so I can do if not empty $_get. So whenever we send anything through the query parameter, so this is called the query string, right? So whenever we send anything to the query string, that comes inside the get request. So I can say if error key is not empty, then simply do an echo dollar underscore get error. That's it. Okay, so I think that's it. And yeah, so I have that. Now I should add a status, or I can say error. Okay, so error and the message. Okay, next, same way I would like to add another thing, that is the success message also, so that we can also pass the success message whenever we want, right? So now right now I'm only passing the error message. So let's see. um, so now in our case here I should have sent the success message, because we have successfully sent the date added the new to do, right? So let's see. Let's refresh. Let's go to add new to do, and let's add something. Click save, and it says success new to do added. Perfect. So now everything, this part is working. Now let's go to the next part, that is going to be edit to do. Okay, now edit to do, we are going to do it in a slightly different way. Now this entire process, we are going to, now you can use separate files for separate actions. Like now this action process.php is doing, adding data inside the to-dos table, right? So you can have a dedicated file for that, and you can have separate files for each and every action. Like for example, over here for edit to do, you can have another action file, right? Then you can have one for delete to do, then mark complete, then mark pending, right? But what I prefer, what I usually follow when there is a small application like this, I don't like to overcomplicate and create so many files over here um, with different names. So what I do is I keep everything in one file, all my logic in one file, and for a small application that is fine. Okay, so I will keep everything in one file, and I will use some kind of a variable to decide which action to be performed. Okay, so now I usually use a variable called action. So you can see what I have done over here in the buttons. So I have 4 buttons over here, and all the buttons have the attribute name, and it has a key called action, and the value of it everywhere it is changing. So it is edit, delete, complete, and pending, right? So this is what the action over here is, right? And similarly, if you come over here to do, now to do add new to do doesn't have any action right now, right? So if I want to use the same file for everyone, that means for edit, mark complete, delete, everything I want to use the same file, then I have to have some sort of a way to find out the actions. So for that, what I can do is I can add an hidden element. So let's select hidden input element, and let's call it action. Okay, and let's give it a value of, let's say, add. Okay, so let's call it add. So this action is add. Let's save it. Okay, so now this particular code should only run if the action is add, right? So let's come over here and first check if if is set. Okay, so dollar underscore post action. Okay, so if action is set, then only the entire code runs. Okay, then inside that, now I am going to do a simple switch statement. Okay, switch dollar post action. Okay, so basically I am just going to run this. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and check which action I have to perform. So the first case I'm going to check is if the action is add. Okay, so if the action is add, I would run the entire code from here. Okay, so let's cut that from here and come inside this case and paste it over here. So now whenever the case is add, this entire code is going to run, and after that I should break, right? So I have break this. Now now whenever the action is add, it should run this particular code. Let's save it. Let's go back. Let's click on add new to do. Let's add something else. Click save. It works, right? So it is adding perfectly. So now what we have eventually done is we have made this to a file where we can handle many cases. Okay, so let's deal with the next case. So the next case that we are going to handle is, let's come to now before handling the edit, let's deal with the delete part first. Okay, so let's handle delete. Let's come over here. Let's add another case, which is going to be case of delete. Okay, so let's handle that. Now how to handle that? Again, uh, all we need is, okay, so let us see what do we need. Now for the delete to work, we you can see we have an action in the index.php which is delete, and for all the other buttons we need to select one of these boxes. Okay, so because you have to delete something, right? So if you try to click on any of these buttons, if you click, you can see it is telling me please select one of these options. That is because if you look at the radio buttons, I have had this required on. Okay, so that means at least one of the elements should be selected, otherwise it will not work. And the next thing is the name of the element. So the name of the radio button is to do, and the value is changing, right? So value here right now is only 1, but we don't want that. We want the value to be the ID of that particular row, right? So we have to first change this for this entire thing to work. Okay, so let me show you. So let me show you before that what is the ID that is coming over here. Okay, so you can see the value of this is 1, that is this. Let's come over here and inspect this. That is also 1. Okay, so that will not work. So what we will do is we will come over here, and the value part we will come and put the ID over here. Okay, so basically I'm just echoing, like the way we have echoed title, we are echoing ID. Once that is done, let's refresh. Let's inspect this and see what is the ID. So you can see value of the to do is 3. Let's come down, check for this 6, right? So now whichever element we select, so that value for to do is also sent, right? So that is very important. And the action based on these 4 buttons, we have 4 different actions, so that action is also sent. Okay, so let me show you what exactly is sent. Okay, so let's come over here first. We have the action set. Now this is the form. Here there is nothing here, so first let us set the method to be post, because that is what the process.php is expecting, and it should go to process.php, right? So once it goes over there, let's save it and let's come over here and let's do a print r and see what exactly I am getting in post. Okay, so let's try this out and let's come over here and let's click on any one of this. Let's refresh first. Yeah, so let's click on hello and let's click on any one of this. Let's say mark pending. Okay, so you can see I'm getting two things: action pending and which to do to be marked pending, to do number 6. Okay, so if I go back and if I select this one, I can select over here and it shows me to do number 3 to be marked pending, right? So now we know how the data is coming to us, right? So we don't need this now. Next I have to delete, right? Now to delete I would have to check certain things, right? So I will copy this entire code from here, paste it over here. So here now I have to check whether the ID is set properly or not. If the ID is not set, then it doesn't make any sense to do anything, right? So I would say I will go back to index.php with an error of select at least one to do. Okay, so I can say select at least one to do. So if you do not select any to do, that means the ID is empty, then the entire process cannot happen. Okay, so next thing I want to run a query, right? So this is not the query that I want. So I would say delete from to do's and I can say where id is equal to post id. Sorry, it's not id. I think what was the just a minute. So what was the radio button called? To do. Okay, so the radio button was called to do, so this should be to do. Okay, perfect. So now I have the query done, right? Now I will run the query, and if the query is not false, then I would say go back and success, and I will say to do deleted. Okay, that's simple. Let's try it out. Let's refresh. Let's delete the last one and click on delete, and it says to do deleted. Okay, let's delete one more. So we can keep on deleting it and it is getting deleted from the database. Okay, perfect. So I have now add new to do working and delete to do working. Okay, so let's now handle the same thing for mark complete and mark pending. Okay, so let's handle that. So let's copy this entire thing from here, duplicate, and let's see what is the action that we have decided. So the action is complete, so that is the action. So complete. Now here also to do is mandatory. Then here the query is going to change. So the query that we want to run is update, because that particular entry is already there. So update to do's, and I want to set a value, set, let's say set status is equal to, so it is complete, right? So it should be equal to 1. Okay, and where id is equal to post to do, right? So basically I'm just making the status of that to do equal to 1. Okay, so then I'm running this, then I can change the comment over here. I can say to do marked complete. Okay, so let's try this out. Let's refresh. Let's say sleeping part is done. Perfect. So now that particular thing is marked complete. Okay, So now let's handle the pending part, which is again pretty easy. So I will duplicate this part, come over here and say pending, and everything will remain the same except the status will now become 0. Okay, and marked pending. Okay, so let's refresh. Let's say I want to undo this. Perfect. So I can undo this also, mark pending. Now I can make this complete. Perfect. So now if all these last three buttons are working, now the only thing left is to handle the edit to do and then handle this message. Okay, so let's handle them also. So let's go ahead and handle edit to do first. So edit to do, when I click on this, it is going to, let's select one, it's going to the process.php file, right? But we don't have a case for handling that. So let's see what was the case. So it is edit. Okay, so the action is edit for the edit button. So let's come over here and add that action. Okay, and let's call it edit. And for the edit to work, again I should have a ID, right? Then then the next thing that I want is I want to have the form. I want to first open the edit to do.html. Okay, and display the data over there, right? So now obviously I cannot do that because the data has to come from the database, right? That means some sort of a processing has to be done in the edit to do page also, right? So for that, what I will do is I will rename this and make this a PHP file so that it can display the data. Now once that is done, now let's come over here and see what we can do, right? So now whenever the action is edit, actually we don't have to do anything. We just have to redirect it to a different place, right? The reason is because we have to the edit is a partial step. It has to first get the data from the user and then do the editing, right? So we cannot directly edit it, right? So first what we will do is we will send the user to an edit to do page, right? So let's do that. So first of all I need to select the so check whether the ID is selected. Then instead of running a query, I will not run a query, and I will directly send the user to this particular location. Okay, so I'm sending the user to this location, that is, instead of index.php I'm going to say edit to do.php, and I'm going to send the ID of the what do you say, the to do, right? So ID of the to do along with, because without that how will I get find out which to do to be edited, right? So I will get the ID from the post to do. Okay, because it is I'm sending it from here, right? So the radio button name was to do, so I'm getting this from here, and it goes to edit to do.php. Okay, and let's see if it works. So let's refresh. So now you can see it goes to edit to do.php and the ID of 1. Okay, so it is trying to edit the first to do. Okay, now whenever to do opens, you want to see the original message over here, otherwise how will you edit it, right? So for that what you can do is you can actually um, do the query over here itself, or you can pass the query from here. So let's do the query here only. Okay, so let's run it. So I will take the code from here, from the index.php file. Okay, so let's take the code from here. So include database, because I want to do database operation, so I have to have this, right? Next I will come over here and take this particular 3 lines also, because I want to get the data, right? Now before running this query, I have to check whether the to do id is actually submitted or not. So I will copy this, come over here, and I will say I'm getting it through the query string, right? So if you see over here, I'm getting it from the query string, so I should do $get id. Okay, so if the id is not set, I will go back and say select at least one to do. Perfect. Okay, and after that I will come over here and I will do, instead of select star from to dos, which will give me all the to dos, I am going to restrict it where id is equal to, I would say, dollar get id. Okay, so now what this does is, instead of giving you all the ids, all the to dos, it will give you only the to do which has your specified id. Okay, now I'm going to query it, and after that I'm going to, because there is going to be only one result, so I can remove this while loop from here. I don't need the while loop anymore. So I have got the data. Okay, so that this data would be having, let me just show you what this data is going to have. So dollar data. Now it is always a good idea to check whether your program is going in the right direction. So let's refresh, and you can see I'm getting whatever is the um, no to do at id 1. Okay, so if I change this id from 1 to 2, you can see I'm getting the next what do you say, to do, right? So everything is depending on this id that I'm passing, right? So let's come back. I can remove this from here, and now I just have to come down, and in this particular place I can say value. So I want to set the default value, right? So I will just say php echo dollar data, and inside data I want the title to be displayed, and that's it. So I have the value over there. Now if I refresh, I should get eat breakfast over here, right? So now I can edit it. So if I say 3, it gives me do coding. If I say 4, it gives me sleep, right? And if I say 5, which is not there, nothing comes. Okay, so I'm assuming that nobody will manually type this. Okay, so perfect. Now let's see what next to be done. So now it is now half of the part is done. Okay, so displaying the original data is done. Now the user will click change the data and click on save button. So what should happen there? Okay, so for that, again, I need to send it to process.php. so send this form also process.php, then method is post, because process is expecting a post request, right? Now once these two things are set, now what we have to do is, if you remember in the add to do, because our process needs an action to complete, right? Because you can see for every case we are checking an action, right? So in the edit to do right now there is no action, but in the add to do you can see what we have done to set the action, right? So we will copy this and go to edit to do and paste it over here, and the value, instead of add, I can do edit, let's say edited. Okay, so because I cannot select edit again, because I have already selected edit in the first step, right? So I cannot do that again, so I will say edited. Okay, so now I can come back to process.php, and I would duplicate a case, and let's call it edited, right? So this edit was for the for the index page. When anybody clicks it, it goes to edit todo.php. After they edit that, then they come to edited.php, right? And here I'm going to do a simple the same thing is going to happen, but instead of setting the status, I'm going to set the title, and the title should be set to dollar post. Okay, so dollar post. And now this time a very important thing that we should know is we need to have two things now. First of all, we need to get the ID, and we also need to get the to do title. Okay, so let's try to edit this a little. So first of all, the name of the title is to do, right? So we don't want that, so let's call it title so that there is no confusion. So the title is coming in with the variable name as title, right? Now I also need the ID, but I don't have the ID right now. But if you see, I have the ID in this particular variable because we are passing it as a query string, right? So I can take that and I can add another hidden element, which is going to be, let's say, ID, and I can say PHP echo ID. That's it. So now what happens is, now there are three things that are coming in from the edit to do page. First of all, it is giving me title, then it is just telling me which action to be performed, that is edited. Then finally it is also giving me which ID, so where it wants to update, right? So there are three things coming up, right? So first, edited, I used to select which action to be performed, right? So then I came over here. Inside this, I am checking whether ID is present or not, right? So I want to check whether ID is present or not. If ID is not present, then I am going to go back to index and say select at least one to do, right? Then I will come over here and I will set the title equal to post title, because if you remember, what we have named it as is title, right? So I will call it title, and where ID is equal to post ID. Okay, so the way we have done it in this particular edited case is slightly different, right? And then we are going to run the query, and then here I can say to do updated, save, and that's it. It should now, so let's say coding done easily. Let's click save, and you can see it says coding done easily, right? So now I can select any one of them, and you can see the messages are also popping up perfectly, right? And I can come over here, say wake up, and click on edit and say walk, click save, and that gets updated. Perfect, right? And I can select them, mark complete. Perfect. Okay, so everything is working. Now only part that is left is this the statistics. Okay, so how many to dos are complete, how many to dos are pending, so all these things are left. Okay, so let's see how to handle that. Okay, so to handle that, I can actually come to index.php, right? And you can see this is where the calculations are being done, right? So I will just copy this code from here and I will paste it over here, right? Instead of now this message is going to be generated by this particular statement, right? So I'm going to run this query. Okay, this actually I do not need to do it twice. Okay, so I will just comment this out because I already have um, wait. Okay, so actually I could have put everything into a function and then I could have found out what is actually happening. That's fine. If you do not want to do multiple um, queries, then what you can do is you can actually do a fetch all. Let me show you how we can handle this. So let's run this and see what is the result, right? So we have this here. Let's call all and let's do var dump, okay, and see what is there inside data. Okay, so instead of assoc I am calling MySQL ifetch all. Okay, and let's see what will happen when I do this, right? Var dump dollar data. Okay, still there is something that is missing. Okay, so let's save it. Let's go to index and refresh. You can see what exactly happens is it gives me the entire result inside an array. You can see it gives me an array of 4, right? That means I can do this also, right? So I'm getting the entire to-dos inside this. So let's call this as to-dos. Okay, so I have fetched the entire result. Now what I'm going to do is uh, now instead of doing the entire thing like this, what I'm going to do is first of all I have to find out the status, right? So let's first find out the status and then we will see how we can optimize this, right? So because we don't want to run the query twice, right? So we have got this. Now what we are going to do is I'm going to run a for each. Okay, for each dollar to do's as dollar to do. Okay, and here I'm going to just check if dollar to do status, okay, is equal to let's say true. If it is true, okay, so if the status is true, then I would say now I have to count, right? So what I will do is I will have three or two variables. Let's call it total equal to 0. Then I would say complete equal to 0, right? So I have two variables. Whenever a new inside the for each, whenever we do a new to do, or I think we can simply do to do's dot length also, sorry, count of to do's. I think we can do that. count dollar to do's. Okay, so I have total. I now just want to find out what is the complete. Okay, so I will say whenever the status is true, I will say complete plus plus. Okay, so the complete will be incremented, and once all the looping is done, I will simply do an echo and say what should I say? um, so dollar total and I would say this, so total, then comma, then I would say dollar complete, complete, and comma, and then the last one is going to be pending, right? But for pending I don't have a variable directly, so I would do dollar total minus dollar complete. So that gives me the pending, and here I just have to add, and that's it. So that gives me my entire status. Okay, so let's save it and check if that works. Refresh. So something is uh, wrong. It says index status, undefined index status. Okay, okay, let me just to do's and check what is exactly happening. So I am getting an array. Okay, so basically I am getting in the form of numbers. Okay, so I should remove this, and instead of doing this I should you can see from here 0. It is having an array of 3, which is first, that is the ID, the second is the title, sorry, the one key is the title, and the 2 key is the status. So instead of using status we should use 2. So if 2 to do of 2 is true, then I am going to do complete. Okay, so that is done, and if I now refresh, now it works. So you can see 4 total, 2 complete and 2 pending. Let me just zoom in and show you. So 4 total, 2 complete and 2 pending. Perfect. Now let us see how to optimize this. So now we have the entire data in this particular to-dos variable. Okay, so what we can do is, instead of running it again and again, what we can do is we can just run this for loop again, right? So instead of doing this, I will just take this and run this to do. Okay, and here instead of doing dollar data, I will do dollar to do. So it is there in 3 places, so let's do dollar to do, and we have to change this with numbers. Okay, so that is the index, right? So 0, index 0 is ID, index 1 is title, and index 2 is status. Okay, so wherever there is status, I am going to replace it with 2. Then wherever there is ID, I am going to replace it with 0, and wherever there is title, I am going to replace it with 1. Okay, and now the difference between this and the previous one is you don't have to run the query twice. Okay, so because we already have the data, so we don't have to run it twice. Okay, so I think that is it. Let's save it, refresh. Everything works. Let's do a final checkup. Let's mark this as pending. That works. Let's mark this as pending. That works. Let's add a new to do, save, and let's delete this. Perfect. And let's sleep. Perfect. Okay, so our entire to do app is ready. I hope you learned a little bit about how you can use PHP and MySQL to create simple applications like this. Thank you everyone, till the next video.